Right, Jace, do you remember a
Yes.
few weeks ago when we had Otis joining us and he was discussing some terrible gadgets for our wall of shame?
Yeah.
Right. Well, it got me thinking about the tech that died a quick death, but realistically should have been on our wall of fame.
Oh, nice.
Right, so I thought we could run through some of the contenders and put it to our listeners and viewers and see if they agree.
Yep.
Right.
Great.
Okay, what do you think?
I've got a contender.
Go on then.
All right. The Atari Jaguar.
Ooh.
Now, this is interesting because, despite being several years ahead of the other sort of notable 64-bit gaming console, the N64 from Nintendo, it wasn't a success in North America. A little bit more successful further afield. It failed based on a poor game library. I think it's fair to say poor marketing, and actually, I think this is unarguable, one of the most confusing controllers ever designed. Although I've got to be careful because being a retro gaming freak myself, I know that a lot of the community have a lot of love for the Atari Jaguar, me included. So just bear with me, folks, right? So it came out in 1993, all right, in the States, 1994. This is how OG I am. When I say 1994, I think, wow, that's quite recent then.
Oh, no. 30 years ago.
It featured a 32-bit... oh my God. 32-bit Motorola 68,000 CPU as the main processor. You might be thinking, wow, Jace is really knowledgeable. I've actually got it written in front of me. Paired with two custom 32-64-bit co-processors called Tom and Jerry.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I didn't know that.
I
That's
didn't know
interesting,
that
isn't it?
either.
Despite being marketed, though, as a 64-bit console, most of its functionality, if we're being honest, relied on the 32-bit CPU. Let's dispense with the tech spec lowdown.
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about the games because ultimately, that's
why you think it should be on the Hall of Fame.
yes, because Rayman on the Jaguar was ace, absolutely brilliant. And there were other notable titles.
What was it that made it so good, though? Do you think?
Well, because it was a revolutionary graphical experience for the time. All of these things sit in a time and space, and if we look back, they look sort of vintage and cute. But actually,
At the time,
well, yeah. I mean, imagine the Atari 2600, right? Half the graphical quality of an Atari 2600 game in like 1979 or whatever, right, was you imagining the box art, sort of overlaid in your mind on the very, very rudimentary graphics that you actually got to play with, right? Something like the Atari Jaguar actually delivered on the promise of next generation graphics for games like, Wolfenstein 3D or Alien versus Predator. That was one of the other titles that was successful in its lineup. Held back, though, I've got to say, by the ergonomics of the controller. Really confusing controller design.
So that probably was the main reason then.
Yeah, I think the reason that I want to shift this into fame rather than shame territory is just because looking back, I have such affection for it. And I know that a lot of the retro gaming community do. It's quite funny. I used to do an online show with a really prominent retro gaming person. And it was quite funny. It was like an in-joke because everyone in chat would argue about they either loved it or they hated it. It's a really divisive
Are you going
console.
to name this person?
Yes, Bex, a.k.a. Trista Bites.
Okay.
And yeah, she loved the Atari Jaguar. And then the 50% of chat that didn't would always like lambast her. It was really funny. It was like a fun...
Yeah,
a fun
but you never leave the school playground,
debate.
do you, really, when you put your head on the block?
Yeah, it's very much a school playground divider, this one. Very much so.
Okay, what about the Xbox Connect?
Oh, I'm so pleased you mentioned that. Spelt with a K.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember getting a rather mysterious invitation to go to America for the unveiling of a mysterious new thing. And I went along.
Was it on a private island, was it?
No, it wasn't. And there were no private aeroplanes. The man behind the camera apparently was with me, and I feel slightly rude for not knowing that. So me and Tom, who is our producer, and he's absolutely smashing, were invited to go. Had no idea what it was about. And we ended up in a basketball arena, somewhere like Seattle or LA or somewhere. I can't remember where it was. I mean, it was massive. Wait for this, a poncho. I was given a poncho. I think it was probably in like Xbox green. And everyone, I sat in this arena And there were all these actors and performers like doing circus stuff. Where the basketball net would be, it'd all been made into a big set, right?
Are you sure you haven't been smoking?
No,
anything?
honestly, just listen to me. This happened. In my ponchos, there's thousands of us in these bloody ponchos looking like aliens, right? The lights go down. There's this big display. All the ponchos light up that we're wearing. We're all like part of this interactive kind of kinetic sort of experience, right? And it's the launch of Kinect. And we're doing wavy arms and stuff, and these performers are flinging about on, bits of rope and that. And it was the launch of the Kinect. And so I was very much hook, line, and sinker on board with the Kinect and the Xbox 360. And I got served it by Microsoft, and Jace, take this. And I was there, and I did all my dancing games and all the rest of it. And I was actually a fan. Little did I know that everyone else absolutely hated it.
So was that E3 in 2010?
Look, do I look like I know things like that? I think it was probably an E3 event, yeah.
Well, it was released in
Related to it.
November 2010.
Okay.
That was the launch date for Kinect for Xbox 360. Obviously, the motion sensing peripheral for the Xbox 360, and it did have incredible potential.
Yeah.
Didn't it really? Now
it kind of scanned your body, didn't it? And you were like, it was like infrared's matrix, and then as you moved,
so you
were the controller.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You became the controller, but it was hindered by a lack of compelling software. I think really limited long-term interest, maybe as well.
I think so. The dancing game was great. It was called Dance Central, I seem to remember, and I had little ones at the time. I think were my kids born?
Well, you would have
then?
done 2010,
and. Dancing about with mom and dad in the front room. It was absolutely fabulous. But it lacked as an interface, so as a kind of motion capture, if you like, an input, it lacked the precision of what the Wii was doing with the Wiimote.
Yeah, it didn't really have any compelling software outside of that, did
No,
it?
they tried. I'm sure there was like a first-person shooter, and there were some other titles that they played around with. But I think definitely, sadly, it needs to be this one. It's a shame rather than a fame.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But it just had, it had that 3D depth sensor. It had some good tech, didn't it, attached to it?
Yeah, and I tell you what's interesting about it, Suzi. Some of the best things that were done with Kinect actually came after the Xbox, when it was used as a peripheral, plugging into PCs, to do things like capture movement in the first faltering days of virtual reality.
Yeah. Because if you look at the field of view as well that they used, they had a 57-degree horizontal and 43-degree vertical field of view, which allowed it to track movement in quite a large area, which was quite new.
Yeah, well, because now we've got very sophisticated accelerometers and all that stuff built into controllers for VR. But I remember a couple of demos coming to the Gadget Show studio. One of them was like this kind of paella pan that you put these special shoes on. And you walked around in it. It enabled you to sprint and run in virtual reality. VR at the time, by the way, that would have been the first generation Oculus headsets, right? And I think it was called Cat VR. I think there's now a product available. But then the way that they interpreted your movement was using a Kinect. It wasn't exactly the Kinect. It was the same hardware as a USB peripheral.
All right, but interesting fact. Do you remember that Kinect actually broke records? So they sold 8 million units within the first 60 days, which actually earned them a Guinness World Record as the fastest selling consumer electronics device at the time. And by 2013, it had sold over 24 million units. That's incredible, isn't it?
And
so you think it was like a nailed-on winner at that point?
Yeah, but all I remember, though, is when they launched the Xbox One, that you were forced to buy it with the Xbox One. And I think the gaming community weren't particularly happy about that, because the Xbox really has always been considered a hardcore gamers kind of platform, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this sort of slightly softer approach to gaming, this whimsical answer to the Wiimote.
Yeah.
I don't know if really people got on board with that. I don't know. But that's extraordinary. I didn't realise they'd sold so many.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is, you get a lot of kind of communities around old tech. So we've talked about the Atari Jaguar. There is an Atari Jaguar, community. the Atari 2600, the same thing, right? The Wii, actually, the same thing. I don't know of one around the Kinect, and I don't know if there's a lot of love for it anymore. But I might be talking out of turn.
No, but it feels like it was a bit corporate, even though obviously it paved the way for technology in the future and AI, etc. It did its fantastic job, but it was discontinued obviously in 2017 due to its decline in popularity. But yeah, like I say, it continued to influence other products.
I
years
just
to come.
wouldn't. I wouldn't put it on. I don't know. It's a difficult one, actually. I really enjoyed my my Kinect.
Let's pause it
But
then.
yeah, but I think I'm in a minority. Tell you what, the audience can decide this one, Susie, because I definitely can't.
Okay, fine. Let us know what you think about the Xbox Connect. I want to mention HD DVD, which was obviously the competitor to Blu-ray at the time. It was sort of a rematch of Betamax VHS, I think, from the 80s.
Yeah.
And it didn't make it. And
No.
it seemed like at the time the sensible thing to do when you've got HD films. So you've got HD DVD, but Blu-ray basically won the battle.
So this is really interesting. I'm really pleased you brought this up, right? Because it's another example. It's a bit like the Kinect. It just shows you the power of consumers and how discerning the end user is, and why we should always listen to the end user ultimately. When the Goliath that is Microsoft can throw insane amounts of money at something like the Kinect and still fail, and similar sums of money at something like HD DVD and fail. So it came out initially as an external accessory, didn't it, for the Xbox 360? And I remember the articles. I remember getting excited about it and realizing that we had something of a VHS versus Betamax war in our hands, didn't we?
Yeah.
And that I was ringside to see this one play out. Couldn't call it. And I'll tell listeners, while I own several PlayStations of various different eras, I think our household is more an Xbox household than it is a PlayStation household. Just getting that out there, right? And so I was particularly interested in what the Xbox was going to bring. So I think it was 30 gigs, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Versus what was the capacity of the Blu-ray?
50.
50 gigs, yeah. And I think for me, that's what did it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, having a Blu-ray as part of whichever generation of PlayStation it was, what was it, the 3, was it? Which one was it that came with the Blu-ray?
Yeah, the 3.
Yeah. Was massively important because, that was a very, very finessed console. It was a big release for them, the PlayStation 3. And so that helped. I remember most people's first experience of Blu-ray was on their PlayStation 3, right? So that gave a huge, big boost to the release of the Blu-ray format. But ultimately, a Blu-ray is for me, it's about getting a high-quality movie experience in HD, or now in 4K, plus the extras. And that's the thing. So the more extras you can pack on your disc, the better value for the consumer. And so 50 gigs versus 30 gigs, well, you can make your own mind up.
Yeah, potentially fantastic technology, but not really backed by the industry.
No,
And
but
the
great,
market.
sort of modern day Betamax versus VHS.
Yeah, 100%.
So come on, Suze, with your saucy glasses. Have you got another one for us?
Oh, okay. I want to mention the Pebble smartwatch.
Yes.
So stay with me. The reason why I want to mention it is because I think it paved the way for the modern market of smartwatches. So it came out, it got funded in 2012, Kickstarter.
No.
Came out 2013. So just 12, 11 years ago. And it had that lovely e-ink display, a really great battery, but it was a proper David and Goliath story, wasn't it? Because
Yeah, I remember it. I remember the e-ink display. And there was a real sort of fervour of interest around it.
There was.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, it was. And it didn't last. It couldn't fight against the might of Samsung and Apple. And it ended up slipping out of the market, really. But it did pave the way.
But you know what? Even now, I can see myself wearing one because it's kind of vintage cool.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds silly because it's only, whatever you said, 12 years old, whatever it is. I like it. I think that's a great one. And I want to nudge that into the fame category, but that's not up to me. It's up to our listeners, isn't
Absolutely, yeah. Let us know. You've got one last one for
I've got
us?
one last one, and wouldn't you know, it's another gaming one. Forgive me, I'm a bit predictable. I want to talk about the Sega Saturn.
Okay.
And the reason is that commercially, I think it's fair to say it wasn't successful, all right? And it was... it was head to head with the PlayStation 1 or the PS1. And that's possibly that's the end of the story, because that was, arguably
such a giant.
well, it was just possibly one of the most significant console releases of them all, wasn't it?
Literally a game changer.
And I love my Sega Saturn. I love the controller. I love the games. I seem to remember the Virtua series of titles that were big in the arcades. This was the first time you could play them in your front room. Virtua Cop with a really good gun. That's what I use my Saturn for now. And I absolutely love it. Sega Rally was available for it. There was a game called Nights into Dreams that was absolutely brilliant. Panzer Dragoon.
Yeah.
I'm going just off memory. These aren't in my notes. I have real passion for this console, and I know a lot of other people do, but commercially it didn't do it.
So it lost out due to market share, presumably.
I think so, yeah.
But the fact that you're still playing it makes me think that it should be a contender for our Wall of Fame.
Well, I mean, these are retro gaming events that I love going to. The Sega Saturn is always there. It's always loved, and there's a big community around them.
It lives on.
It lives on.
So we would like you to decide whether these should be shame or fame. Have you got our list of contenders?
I have, in no particular order, Atari Jaguar. All right. Connect for the Xbox platform. Pedal smartwatch we just mentioned. Sega Saturn, and of course HD DVD.
So there's our list of 5 contenders. Let us know what you think.